we've come a really long way when it comes to putting patients first, putting their needs first, meeting them where they are through hybrid trials. I still think there's a long way we could go. I think we still need the diversity in trials. We need to make it easier for patients to participate.
I think with what you're mentioning, it sounds like a lot of complexity.
Clinical trials are just complex, and it's absolutely necessary because it's all about ensuring safety in trials and ensuring that we have enough data to know if a drug is both safe and effective.
Welcome to the K in Clarity podcast. I'm the host, Mezue. During this episode, we're joined by Jennifer Turcotte, currently the Executive Vice President of Commercial Strategy at BioTeam. Jennifer Turcotte has been instrumental in driving comprehensive go-to-market strategies and business growth within the life sciences and healthcare technology space. In her role at BioTeam, she leads the development and execution of strategic initiatives that align product offerings with market needs and customer demand, leveraging expertise in marketing operations, communications, and integrated solutions. Turcotte's background spans leadership roles at major organizations such as Genentech, where she was in project strategy, SoftServe, where she was vice president of marketing for healthcare and life sciences, and Salesforce, where she served as the senior director of pharma strategy. Her proven track record includes implementing AI and data-driven strategies, leading high-performing teams, and enabling organizations to deliver innovative solutions in healthcare and life sciences. Turcotte's expertise in go-to-market planning, marketing enablement, and commercial strategy continues to position her as a leader driving measurable improvements in healthcare delivery and digital transformation. In this conversation, we discuss her extensive experience in marketing strategy and product management within the life sciences and B2B software sectors. The conversation delves into the complexities of clinical trials, the importance of patient experience, and the misconceptions surrounding scientific data and AI. Jennifer explores the need for better data readiness, the challenges of translating technical messaging, and the evolving role of AI in enhancing data management. Lastly, she also discusses the significance of collaboration among non-technical teams and offers valuable insights for entrepreneurs in the digital health space. If this is your first time tuning in, here's the gist. The healthcare industry is buzzing with innovations, but there's a lot of noise and misconceptions out there. That's where we come in. Because of my experience in the healthcare ecosystem, I've gained a unique vantage point into the industry's inner workings. We're bringing you the conversations that typically happen behind boardrooms and strategy sessions, the real challenges, innovative solutions, and game-changing insights that are reshaping healthcare as we know it. On this podcast, we're bringing you face-to-face with the industry-leading healthcare founders, executives, and innovators. We're talking about the nitty-gritty of building and scaling healthcare companies, the hurdles they've overcome, and the strategies that have led to their success. More importantly, we dive into the personal challenges that come with trying to change a system as complex as U.S. healthcare. So whether you're a healthcare entrepreneur, a medical professional, or just someone passionate about the future of healthcare, this podcast is your backstage pass to the minds shaping the industry. Now let's have Jennifer tell us a little bit about themselves. Welcome, Jennifer, to the K in Clarity podcast. For the people listening, can you give a brief overview of who you are and what it is you do?
Yes, absolutely. Happy to. I'm Jennifer Turcotte. I have over 20 years experience in marketing strategy, product management, and business development across life sciences and B2B software companies. I've held leadership roles at Genentech, Salesforce, and right now I'm currently leading the commercial strategy at a small IT consulting firm, BioTeam, where we're focused on helping IT meet the needs of scientific researchers.
Amazing. Well, as you know here, probably, we like to do an icebreaker question just to get us started off. And so my first question for you is, if you could instantly redesign any one aspect of the clinical trial experience for both patients and researchers, what would it be and why, based off your experience?
I think it would really have to focus probably on the patient experience. I think we've come a really long way when it comes to putting patients first, putting their needs first, meeting them where they are through hybrid trials. I still think there's a a long way we could go. I think we still need the diversity in trials. We need to make it easier for patients to participate that are not in big geographic centers, remote trials, etc. Unfortunately, we've seen some interesting things happen where CVS, um, Walmart, others have really tried to get into clinical trials. And I think that there's been some hurdles there, but I'm still really optimistic about how technology and just putting patients first and what sponsors are doing is really going to be game changing for the industry.
Mm, mm. I know you've talked about in your intro, that you've had a career in marketing and communicating really the value of complex life sciences services and technologies. And so that's a very unique take on it. And so I think with your experience, what do you think is the biggest misconceptions, among clients, stakeholders about scientific data, analytics, or data trials? And how do you go about addressing those?
Yeah, I think if we think about scientific data, when I worked at Genentech, there was a prevailing belief that we just needed more data. And I think the reality really was that there was so much data that we had both internally and data that was purchased or received from collaborators. But when we tried to apply machine learning to address some complex questions we were asking of the data, we really realized that the data lacked structure, there was no metadata. It was largely inaccessible. And really, we really realized that the focus needed to be on data readiness and usability and not volume. So I think that that's one sort of misconception. I think if we think about today and kind of what's happening around I think another misconception that we see is really how AI are going to solve all our problems automatically. And then, again, if you think about it, like a lot of analytics, now we're looking at AI and machine learning being applied. Similarly, AI being applied to digital trials. But bottom line is, well, AI holds a lot of promise. The same reality exists around scientific data and AI. It requires clean, structured data and even proper infrastructure, storage and compute to be fully utilized. So it is boring. It may be seen as boring, but it's really essential to lead first with data foundations and infrastructure enablement. And these are real prerequisites that must be taken before AI can deliver value.
Hmm, hmm. Going from there, I know you've worked closely with, scientific and technical teams. And so what challenges have you really seen companies face when it comes down to translating the technical value into actually the messaging that resonates with decision makers in pharma and biotech as well?
Yeah, I've spent a big part of my career in software product marketing and, like you said, primarily marketing technical software solutions to, you know, PhDs, IT, basically science and technical teams. And I worked very closely with scientists and IT to really understand, what it was we were selling, um, and how it worked. And the challenge is that scientists like to spend and IT like to spend a lot of time explaining the how. But at the end of the day, the way that organizations and individuals make purchase decisions is around why something matters and how it will tangibly help them reduce costs, increase efficiency, or drive insights or revenue. So I think it's really about translating the technology into business value and into a language that's going to resonate with your, ideal customer.
Yeah, I think with what you're mentioning, it sounds like, a lot of complexity. And I think this takes me to a question when it comes down to it is, a lot of people view clinical trials as something that's slow, complex, really super hard to engage with. And so, from your perspective, what are the main factors that really contribute to this complexity? And what changes, either technologically or otherwise, could really help go about streamlining this process?
Yeah, I mean, clinical trials are just complex. There really is nothing that is going to change that. They're really complex for three reasons. Number one, there's a huge regulatory and compliance burden, and it's absolutely necessary that that be in place because it's all about ensuring safety in trials and ensuring that we have enough data to know if a drug is both safe and effective. Um, and there's no kind of shortening that. There's no getting around that. I think the other big challenge that a lot of people don't realize is that there are multiple stakeholders that are involved in running, executing a trial, and delivering data to the FDA and getting drugs approved. These stakeholders all have different priorities. So you have patients, you have sites and investigators, and then you have the clinical trial sponsor. And so, managing the different priorities and the organization, processes, and communication across the stakeholders is extremely complex. And then there's a lot of site and operational complexity, where I just mentioned there needs to be coordination across sites, data collection across the sites, across digital health technologies like wearables and sensors if they're being used. All this data needs to be brought together and then it needs to be verified. So, they're just complex. But that said, the second part of your question around what changes, technological or otherwise, could help streamline things. Well, we really saw during the pandemic that we were able to move from, you know, fully centralized to, decentralized and remote aspects of a clinical trial. And so a big part of this is software that's being used for electronic data capture, patients being able to do electronic consent, um, and more has been used in trials for quite some time. So we're also seeing broader adoption of digital health technologies where sensors and wearables now can provide continuous real-time data collection. There's apps that patients can use to do, self-reporting on patient-reported incomes rather than waiting to go visit a site to provide that information. And then now we're seeing really artificial intelligence and machine learning being applied to things like patient recruitment optimization, um, use of predictive analytics to really forecast the type of enrollment that might happen across sites so that you can optimize sites. And then a really important aspect is really protocol optimization. The more complex the protocol, um, the more complex the design of the trial, the longer the trial may take. So it's really around optimizing the protocol to reduce the complexity. And really there's so many other ways too to just think about how technology is going to help streamline things. At the end of the day, science takes as long as it takes, but absolutely we're seeing technology being applied to trials in amazing ways.
Mm. I know seeing the swing, between centralized to decentralized and now the hybrid clinical trial models and also being involved in decentralized trials and research alliance. What are the biggest lessons learned from this particular evolution? And how do you see the future of trial design, as you've mentioned, really balancing the patient needs and outcomes that are out there?
Yeah, I think the old model of centralized trials had a lot of shortcomings. The geographic barriers that I've already talked about excluded a lot of patients. Um, there's a high patient burden. It still exists today, but it was higher in the past. Um, there were size capacity constraints that limited enrollment. And a one size fits all approach doesn't match patient needs. I think we really saw the huge push to decentralized trials during COVID, and we learned a lot from what worked and what didn't work during that time. I think that a couple of lessons came out of that. One is a fully decentralization of a clinical trial just isn't really practical. feasible, and it's not actually always better. Um, the hybrid approach really works because some patients actually prefer in person visits to get that human connection and reassurance. So, in an ideal situation, there's some amount of patient monitoring, patient self reporting, maybe blood draws being taken at home. But then, maybe every 3 months, a patient actually goes into a site and meets with a principal investigator or the physician. The other thing is that technology alone doesn't solve the patient engagement piece. So at the end of the day, wearables work for some people, they don't work for everybody. More elderly patients can have a more difficult time with a wearable. And so, the reality check is if you're going to want to use wearables and sensors, there is some investment that needs to be made in tech support and training and making sure that patients are actually using, um, the technological solution and getting benefit from it. So the human touch point is required then, even to make sure that they're adhering to use of the technology. And then the data quality is really important. So I think we've gotten really better here around, measuring and managing and monitoring data quality across sites. But then there's also a question of data quality and is how accurate is the data being captured that patients are using through sensors or wearables or data that's self-reported through apps. So I think that what we've really learned is that the best approach is really using digital health technologies and applying it in certain aspects of the trial, which really make for more of a hybrid model where, you're not completely centralized or decentralized. You're using a bit of both. Um, and, these digital health technologies are really making trials more efficient. The data collection is better and more accurate. And overall, there is a better experience for the patient. And so what we're seeing today emerge is really these hybrid clinical trial where there's really flexibility and lots of options for patients. They can choose remote versus in-person visits. Technology can augment rather than replace some of the clinical oversight. Um, the sites still remain central to patient care, ensuring that technology is replicated across sites and in use by the sponsor. Also, make sure that it reduces risks and there's better data collection. And then finally, I think it's easier from a regulatory perspective to get approval for hybrid rather than fully decentralized. And fully decentralized doesn't work for all therapeutic areas. You could have a trial that's mostly decentralized if it's something that is a dermatological trial or something like that. So I think the winning formula really is around designing trials, thinking about patients' needs from the start, particularly around the goals of the trial, what types of patients you want to enroll, and more. I think it's about investing in interoperable platforms. They exist today with vendors, a number of them that I'm very familiar with. They've been hmm, they've been available in the market and being used for quite some time. I think that we're also seeing a lot of collaboration happen between sponsors and the FDA is, very amenable to looking at, okay, how do we use this data from sensors and wearables and include it as part of the data, the final data in the trial. And then, measure what matters. And at the end of the day, trials need to feel a little less like research and more like personalized care with the benefit of contributing to science.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a profound statement. But I think another thing to tackle upon is that, regulatory and compliance requirements really go about shaping how, new technologies in genomics, AI, and data sharing are really positioned in the healthcare market. And so how do you go about balancing highlighting innovation with reassuring clients about, the risk and compliance that goes about it?
Yeah, this is a great question because, as you know, I've spent a lot of time in the software industry working in marketing, but I also spent time at Genentech doing, product strategy and personalized healthcare strategy and IT. And I really saw firsthand how, life sciences companies take a tremendous amount of risks when they're in the early stages of research. And so they need to make a lot of bets to kind of finally get something to succeed. On the flip side, counter to that, um, when I looked at how life sciences companies bring in technology and use technology to help, you know, improve operations and, all the aspects of R&D and clinical trials and what have you. I really saw firsthand how, cutting edge can be perceived as a little too risky and, with good reason. Life sciences industries they're highly regulated. They're working with human data. There's privacy and security issues. And so I think, marketing to life sciences companies, you really need to think about not leading with revolutionary or, huge technology advancements, but rather, it's proven innovation. It's been, validated and lead with a lot of value-based messaging and proof points. Prove that you're innovative and show that by customer stories, case studies. The bottom line is you want your prospects to think this technology is advanced enough. This company understands our problems. Um, this is going to help us gain a competitive edge, but it's been proven, so we're not going to be the guinea pig, and we're not going to take on great risk by trying something that hasn't been done before. So I think while innovation may win attention, it's like the proof and the validation that really is what life sciences companies want to hear and see.
Hmm. Yeah, that's something that, I've spoken to another leader about is when it comes down to everything that it's in healthcare, going about and screaming innovation isn't what's actually going to bring the change, right? It's those tactical points and really speaking about the value and the experiences that people have that's really going to bring about, the change that people want to see. So I think that's a good thing to note.
Yeah.
But going from there, I think data integration and interoperability, as you mentioned, are actually persistent points in healthcare, but especially in life sciences as well. And so, how do you persuade those potential clients that you mentioned to go about exploring new solutions that will work within their current operating existing systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about it, and certainly day in, day out in my current company, what we're really seeing top of mind for many organizations is around, you know, how do I ensure that my data is ready for AI and my infrastructure is ready for AI? And, big part of that is data integration and interoperability. I think the challenge is that to date, a lot of the solutions have been kind of have overpromised and underdelivered. And I think that there is, um, I don't know, a lot of skepticism around uh, certain, new approaches to solutions, new platforms. Um, there's a lot of tech debt right now where companies have spent a lot of time on integration and things still aren't working well. So, I think that if you think about, how do you start to market and persuade clients to think about new solutions? I think it's really important to go in and understand the underlying data issues that are causing these problems. Maybe perhaps it's not integration and interoperability. Maybe it's really more about um, data formats and metadata. Um, it's really about understanding what the underlying challenges are and then really thinking about showing them what works, improving it through customer stories, and then ultimately a proof of concept. I think the other thing is um, companies today want to like reassure organizations, some of what they have in place can be reused, but some of it does need to be replaced. And just recognize that there is a cost of doing nothing and not focusing on getting your data ready, making sure it's integrated, being able to deploy AI effectively. Um, you know, Maintaining the status quo is probably going to be more expensive than making the change that's required. And so I think, it's about taking small steps, thinking about proof of concepts, using customer stories as examples, and just showing value to the customers.
Hmm. In your experience as well, what are the most effective strategies for fostering collaboration between technical and non-technical teams, between, scientists, IT professionals, and business leaders to really go about accelerating innovation in healthcare data infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and one that's really important now more than ever. It's absolutely critical that collaboration exists between scientists, IT, and the business to make sure that companies are achieving their goals as it pertains to really getting the most value out of their data and then using that data to drive insights, um, using that data to leverage AI, machine learning. And working at BioTeam right now across our life sciences customers, we do see the biggest barrier to the life sciences scientific data innovation. It's not technology. It's really bringing together the needs of the scientists with IT capabilities and with speaking a language that business leaders understand, and working through some of these, conflicting priorities, and getting everybody on the same page. So it's like building a bridge. And that's a lot of what the company I work for does. That's a lot of what we do. Um, Scientists, they want tools that are easy to use, that don't disrupt their workflows, and they want the compute to be ready. They want to be able to find their data. Meanwhile, IT wants security, they want stability, um, they want a low total cost of ownership. And of course, business is looking for things like return on investment, efficiencies. Um, a lot of these desires and really requirements often feel incompatible. But, the reality is, at the end of the day, all these different groups are working towards the same goal. If it's a life sciences company, it's really about bringing, you know, better drugs to market for patients. It's a really about serving a need that's missing in the industry. So, think about shared outcomes rather than individual departmental goals. So it's not about like what does IT need or what do scientists needs or, you know, how can IT support the science better? It's about what is the outcome or business goal that we're trying to achieve together and how can we work together to achieve that? So, rather than thinking about we need to implement a data lake, it's more about, well, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to reduce the time it takes to get to some sort of insights? What is the technology that can support that? And how can you make sure that the scientists have what they need to get to those insights faster? I think another thing that we see is that's critical is to bring together cross-functional teams. So, You put together a scientist, an IT architect, and a business analyst on the same team from day one. They're going to work together. They're going to make trade offs together. They're going to own the outcome together. And that's actually exactly how BioTeam staffs our projects for our clients. And we ask our clients to do the same thing, bring these different groups together and have them work together on creating a solution. I think the other thing is that data literacy and the value of data needs to be a company wide initiative. So I think that there are obviously lots of things that scientists don't understand in terms of like cloud costs, optimization, high performance compute, parallel clusters. They just want to get to their analysis faster. And IT doesn't understand some of the things around the complex workflows and analysis science needs, things around statistical significance. It's important to kind of invest in ensuring that IT understands science to a certain degree and vice versa. When there's a baseline understanding of each group's roles and how their role is driving the overall success of the company, um, you're really rewarding collaboration and not kind of individual department progress. So, I think the collaboration isn't about more meetings or better collaboration tools. It's really more about creating aligned incentives across these groups, determining shared goals, building out these cross-functional teams, and then really building out an understanding and a genuine empathy for what each individual team is challenged with.
Hmm.
And I think, you see that when you come to work and you work with other people. You really need to have an innate respect for the work that everybody brings into the organization and what they're trying to get done. And I think when a scientist understands IT and when IT understands scientific workflows, that's when infrastructure innovation can really happen.
How do you see the role of AI and machine learning really evolving in the context of scientific data management? And what are the biggest opportunities and risks that you see?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working in and around AI and machine learning since my days at Genentech, around 2015. And, it's definitely moved from a nice to have to a must have. Um, and we're seeing AI start to handle things like data quality, metadata generation, um, and even experimental design, not just analysis, which is what it was being used for in the early days. I think the biggest opportunity when it comes to scientific data management in the area of AI is around automated data curation. So AI can tag and annotate and standardize massive data sets automatically. And so what used to take teams months now can happen in hours and with better consistency than you could get from humans. I think there's a lot around predictive data quality. So AI can predict where data quality issues might occur and even prevent them. And you see this being used a lot in clinical trials and regulatory submissions. Um, and then a lot around knowledge extraction is happening. And so at Salesforce, I saw that firsthand where natural language processing was being used in med affairs to really get to insights faster, to get the information to physicians faster, and to kind of reuse this information across the group. So, I think that we're talking about unlocking insights that are trapped in all the unstructured data that exists in life sciences, and finally making some of the scientific knowledge computationally accessible.
If a life science company out there is just starting to think about, AI for data management, what's the one thing that you'd recommend they should not do? And then what's the mistake that you see everyone currently making in the market?
Yeah, I think I think I've already touched on this, and um, I don't want to belabor it, but I think a lot of people, a lot of companies think about just jumping straight into AI, and we see that being done today, and then it's sort of a second thought around, well, okay, we've started down this path, but is our data ready? And so, it's like, let's implement machine learning for our data quality, or, let's use AI to integrate some data. But at the end of the day, AI isn't going to fix all your data challenges. And in some cases, it could just amplify it. So I think at the end of the day, I think the biggest mistake that we see is people jump into starting to want to use AI, but they don't first take a look at, is the data available? Is it integrated? Um, can it be used? Is there enough data? And you really need to spend time thinking about not just bringing in an AI platform, but making sure that your data is ready. You have the metadata, the data standards are consistent, and then you actually have the compute infrastructure you need to run your models at scale. So um, the foundation data and the compute infrastructure are absolutely critical for AI to be, effective, efficient, and to give companies the return on investment, or for companies to get the promise out of AI that they're hoping to. So,
Mm. Yeah, that kind of speaks on like the what AI adoption looks like if it's right versus what it looks like if it's wrong. So I think that's
yeah,
a good thing to note there.
yeah.
Over your career as well, you've seen the scale and complexity of data grow, as you just mentioned. And so, how's the industry's approach to managing data like this really evolved? And what do you think are the persistent challenges that are maybe going to remain, as you just mentioned, in the adoption, despite, with all these advances in technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think that smaller biotech companies now are starting really being able to compete with big pharma, because AI has leveled the playing field in so many ways. And, now a small company has the same analytical capabilities that, used to require, a tenfold person data team. I think regulatory submissions happen faster, because AI is now generating compliant documentation throughout the trial, or throughout the research process. And there's no more scrambling to recreate, uh, you know, information findings that happened 2 years ago. So I think those are kind of a couple of examples. I also think that, you know, at the end of the day, scientists need to trust. Um, and I think it's really about trust and validate when it comes to AI results and AI systems. As we know, it's still evolving, and so it's really important to spend time validating AI outputs, and making sure that complexity isn't being added without value being added.
For current or aspiring entrepreneurs in digital health or health tech, especially those that are really hoping to reach the high risk or marginalized populations, what do you wish you had known maybe when you started? And what advice would you really offer to them now?
Yeah, I think that, technology has really allowed for better storage of data at scale. Standards have been emerged. Cloud platforms and tools have really helped allow for distributed research to be done effectively. But I still think that there's some pervasive issues that exist. And I think that it's really about thinking about data as a shared asset and thinking about all the aspects of data really requiring um, the foundation in place for everybody in the company to make use of it. And so I think if you're thinking about starting out, I think it's really important as you get smarter about AI as an example to really understand how important data is and the data foundation as the underlying aspect of anything that you do in that area.
Hmm. Well, perfect. Now it is time for the lightning round. So I have three questions for you.
Okay.
So, my first question is, what's the most overlooked factor that really slows down clinical trial timelines in your experience?
Well, I think I already touched on it, but probably the challenge of aligning different stakeholders who have different priorities. And so I think aligning sites, sponsors, and the patients who all really have a different goal of participating in the trial. I think it's critical to kind of align on shared goals, recognize where trade offs need to be made, and really make sure that collaboration is in place so that issues can be raised effectively.
Hmm. In one sentence, what's the biggest challenge to effective data sharing in life sciences today? And how do you see that changing?
Oh, there are so many, but I guess one thing I have seen with scientists is that sometimes the there's a bias to it. It's my data, it's my research, it's my results, and at the end of the day, it's everyone's data and it's everyone's challenge. So I think that recognizing that data is a shared asset, um, and having the right data foundation is in place, um, is probably a, a hurdle. And at the end of the day, if you can overcome that, cultural change, I think you can get to a point of effective data sharing and really great use of AI on top of the data that you have.
Hmm. Then, my last question for you is, what's one digital innovation in clinical research that you believe will have the greatest impact in the next 5 years?
Ooh, that's a tough one too. I mean, there's so many, and I think that we're just starting to scratch the surface on AI being used in clinical trials. I think we've got some way to go. Um, so I guess I would say what I'm really starting to see is the proactive use of wearables and sensors in trials, and for it no longer to be an afterthought after the trial has been started, but that companies now, sponsors are really looking at how these technologies can be used. And as they think about the design of the trial, they're designing in mind with the idea that these wearables and sensors will help patients with the trial of the burden be smaller, the data gathering will be more effective. And, the FDA has come such a long way in really um, adopting the fact that this data can be validated and used in the final results of a trial. I think is a big huge shift and a very positive one.
Hmm. Well, Jennifer, thank you for your time and thoughts today, especially in the aspects of, messaging, data sharing, especially in life sciences. Before we wrap up, is there any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are really at a really exciting time when it comes to a lot of technological transformations. And I think that when I talk to companies that are adopting AI, the ones that are going about it in a very strategic and methodical manner are really thinking about um, how do we need to get our data and our infrastructure ready to support the AI needs of the researchers. And, you know, having it be, a very collaborative, all hands on deck discussion around, you know, it's not the compute, the storage, and IT, delivering what science needs, but it's rather the groups working together to understand how they can get there faster and with the right infrastructure in place.
Jennifer, thank you so much for your time today and speaking on the insights that you have on messaging, data sharing, especially in life sciences. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to add or final thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think, with this advent of AI and, we're in the era of I think it's now more important than ever, particularly in life sciences, that there need to be, a shared understanding of what the scientists are trying to achieve and how IT can best support it. And so, I think as an example, IT might provision some storage or compute and not realize that, the genomics workflow actually needs an ultra high speed parallel file system and just a few hours of massive computation. So I think it's really going in and understanding the use cases and then mapping that to infrastructure needs. And like I talked about, like fostering collaboration across the two organizations so that a co-design of the infrastructure needed um, will really ensure that scientists' workflow needs and the use of AI will be effective in the organization.
Hmm, hmm. Well, that's perfect. Thank you again for your time. Where can people choose to engage or follow you if they choose to do so?
Well, you can follow me or find me on LinkedIn, Jennifer Turcotte. The company I'm at right now is BioTeam, and I'm based in Los Angeles. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to continue the conversation.
Okay. Well, Jennifer, thank you for your time on the K in Clarity podcast.
Thank you.
Mhm.